Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first consultation webinar session on the expansion of the nationwide house energy rating scheme to existing homes. My name is Chris Vitaroni, and I'm the Assistant Secretary for Home Ratings and Disclosure here at the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, or DQ, as you might know us. The focus of today's webinar will be on the consumer experience with NatHERS for existing homes. I can see a number of people are just still trickling in, so I might just wait another 30 seconds and then we'll get underway. So it won't be too long. All right, we've got a pretty good quorum now, I think, well over 150 people, which is fantastic. So we might get underway. We appreciate you've all got busy days. So I'd like to start this session by acknowledging the First Nations people throughout Australia and to recognise their continuing connection to country and culture. I'm joining you today from Canberra on the lands of the Ngunnawal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement and respect to any First Nations people joining us today. And please note that today's webinar is being recorded, and it's our intention to publish the recording on the website in due course, just to make sure others who perhaps weren't able to attend but were keen to can still access the information that we'll be providing to you today. So the structure of today's webinar is shown there on the screen. And please be aware that we do have pre-recorded elements for today's session. Before I hand off to the presenters today, I want to provide those of you who are perhaps new to the Nationwide House Energy Rating Scheme, or NatHERS as we refer to it, with some background information. So for over 30 years now, NatHERS has been providing an evidence-based and data-driven way to assess the energy performance of new homes, and it is the preferred energy rating method for demonstrating compliance with energy performance requirements under the National Construction Code, with over 90% of new home builds assessed using NatHERS. With regards to existing homes, we know that there is a significant opportunity to help drive improvement in Australia's existing housing stock, as most Australian homes were built before the introduction of minimum energy performance requirements, which we see in new home designs today. We also know that most homeowners need better information to be able to make informed decisions when buying or selling homes, or perhaps renovating their existing home. So just like new homeowners, those with more established homes, if you like, should be able to access reliable information on the energy performance of their home, and also access advice on upgrades that can be made to reduce their energy costs, but also to improve the comfort of the homes that they live in. And so that is really what the Australian government is committed to achieving through the expansion of NatHERS to existing homes. And we're really pleased that you could join us today and be part of this consultation process on the proposed approach to delivering the expansion of NatHERS to existing homes. And while we know that there is a lot of work still to do to ensure that NatHERS for existing homes is fully functional and fit for purpose, it is worth reflecting that the scheme already has established national governance arrangements administered by the Australian government on behalf of all states and territories. Its legitimacy and credibility is supported by the best available science from the CSIRO. The scheme has nationally established third-party delivery partners and over 800 assessors accredited for new build ratings already. And it is accepted by international investors as a trusted and verifiable source to support green investment. The development pathway for the expanded scheme was agreed to by Australia's energy and climate ministers in late last year. And this consultation process that we're undertaking now is a key part of that pathway. So the key purpose of today and our two remaining webinars that will follow in the next week is to provide you with information on what's proposed for the expansion of NatHERS to existing homes, and also an opportunity to ask questions and seek clarification about the information covered today. So Joe Brennan, who's leading the NatHERS program design team, will briefly outline the structure of consultation, which will give us an overview of NatHERS, and then delve into what consumers and the public will interact with and be able to access at launch mid next year. You'll also be hearing from Felicity Woodhams, who leads the Home Energy Transition Engagement team, on the communication activities underway for the expansion of NatHERS to existing homes. And we'll then open the session up for questions using a tool that you might be familiar with. It's called Slido. We'll show you this QR code that will appear in a moment. You can, if you have a question, you can simply scan the QR code with your phone and follow the prompts. Or if you're not able to do that, or you don't have the tech, then you have the other option of visiting www.slido.com and then enter NatHERS into the joining as a participant box. So we certainly invite you to submit questions throughout the presentation, although you might find that the questions that you might be thinking about are in fact answered as we go along, so just keep that in mind. Also, just to note that we are moderating Slido, just given the potential volume of questions. We do have a lot of people attending today, which is great. So there will be a preference given to questions that are most relevant to this particular session on consumer experience. And we ask you to kindly include your name and organisation if applicable. It just helps us to be able to follow up after the session if we need to on any questions that you may have raised. And so with that, I'll hand over to the team to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Jo Brennan, and my team leads the program design for the expansion of the nationwide house energy rating scheme. I'm going to take you through an overview of the consultation process firstly, and then we'll move into talking about certificate, upgrade advice, and I'll hand over to Felicity for communications. So on Monday, the 29th of July, we released the NatHERS for Existing Homes consultation paper, and that was released on the department's consultation hub and the NatHERS websites. We'd welcome any feedback in any form on the proposals outlined in that paper. So it could be a comprehensive submission from your organisation, which responded to all the questions outlined in that consultation paper, or it could be a short letter with your organisation's general views. We're also running these webinars to provide an opportunity to ask questions or seek clarification on the proposed approach to expanding NatHERS. So starting with the first session today, we're focusing on the consumer experience, looking at assessments, certificates, upgrade advice, communications, and general outputs from the consumers. On Monday, the 12th of August, we'll be running a session focused on assessor services. So this will cover off training, accreditation, and auditing. The third session will be run on Thursday, the 15th of August, and that will focus on energy ratings and energy rating tools and tool accreditation. We've got consultation open until Friday, the 30th of August, and we really encourage you to get involved in any way that suits you and your organisation, and we really value your feedback. I'll start with an overview of NatHERS for Existing Homes. So let's do a quick refresh on the nationwide house energy rating scheme. NatHERS provides robust, reliable and credible assessments and ratings for homes. It's administered by the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water in the Commonwealth on behalf of all states and territories. So the purpose of NatHERS is to help improve the design, construction and energy performance of Australian homes to reduce energy waste and demand. The scheme does this by giving people information and modelling tools that can assess different options, For example, at the design stage of a new building, NatHERS can provide information about how the design or window layouts can be changed to reduce the need for heating and cooling. At that stage, different options can be tested and the house can be optimised at its design stage. At the existing building stage, NatHERS can provide information about what upgrades could be made, such as adding window shading or installing an efficient heating or cooling device, and again, different options can be tested. The final output from NatHERS is a star rating out of 10 for the thermal performance and an overall energy rating score for the whole home. So the higher the rating, the more comfortable the home will be to live in and the less energy the home will use, making it cheaper to run. There's a significant opportunity to upgrade the energy performance of Australia's housing stock. Most Australian homes were built without consideration of Australian climates, and most were built before the introduction of minimum energy performance requirements. Improving the energy performance of Australian homes will help us meet net zero emissions by 2050. Residential buildings still account for more than 10% of emissions and around a quarter of electricity use. I'd say many of you here could probably relate personally to a story about living in an uncomfortable home, and that's because the average existing home in Australia has an estimated rating of less than 3 out of 10 stars. New homes are required to meet a minimum of 7 stars under increased requirements for energy efficiency in the National Construction Code 2022. So improving a home from 3 to 5 stars could reduce the amount of heating and cooling needed by around 40%. Recent research by ClimateWorks demonstrated that full electrification of appliances and solar PV plus thermal upgrades could save households thousands each year. NatHERS for Existing Homes aims to provide consistent and comparable ratings to support improved energy performance of homes and supports a range of broader objectives. Thermal performance improvements can help increase the comfort of homes, while installing energy efficient appliances can help reduce energy costs. NatHERS also provides information on the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the operational energy use of the home, with upgrade advice aiming to help reduce emissions. NatHERS also values energy at the time it's used or produced in the system, helping to reduce energy demand on the grid. The development of NatHERS for existing homes will be delivered through 3 stages. So in late 2023, Energy and Climate Change Ministers agreed the development stages with a focus on design, build, trial, operate and scale up. We're currently consulting on stage 1 for launch in mid-2025, with a proposal on the delivery model for NatHERS for existing homes and trials underway. There are also ongoing opportunities for consultation on guidelines, rules and strategies that will underpin NatHERS, and that consultation will run out to 2025, although much of the detail will be run through NatHERS advisory groups. Ministers will be presented with a final design of the existing home scheme for consideration in 2025 to allow for launch mid-2025. Post-launch of stage 1, there'll be further work to enhance and scale up NatHERS in readiness for disclosure and other demand drivers. There are a broad range of drivers for the availability of ratings for existing homes, as it's a key enabling mechanism for a range of targeted building policies. The drivers range from overcoming information barriers for households, supporting the disclosure of energy efficiency at the point of sale or lease, or enabling grant programs or financial products to accelerate investments in upgrades. I'll now take you through a little bit about existing home assessments and trials. So what is involved in getting an assessment and a rating? There are some differences between the assessment process for new homes and for existing homes. NatHERS for new homes rarely have consumer involvement, as the assessment is typically completed on behalf of a builder, building designer or architect to meet energy efficiency standards in the National Construction Code. The assessor has access to detailed building plans and design specifications. For existing home assessments, there is a need for an assessor to go on site, as most existing homes won't have detailed plans and specifications available for the assessor as they do for a new home design. The addition of on-site data collection presents opportunities to inform homeowners about the benefits of improved home energy performance. So once the data has been collected by an assessor, it's entered into the cloud-based NatHERS benchmark tool, which uses building physics and detailed information about the characteristics of appliances to calculate the ratings. A certificate is then generated to give consumers simple to understand information on the performance of their home, as well as potential upgrade opportunities. The NatHERS certificate and upgrade advice will be the key elements consumers will engage with and are the key focus of the next section of this webinar. We're running trials for NatHERS to test the tools, systems and processes prior to launch in mid-2025. This will ensure they're effective and can be delivered at scale. You'll see from their slide there are two streams of existing home assessments planned for the trials. This includes trialling the assessment approach and possible approaches to streamlining on-site data collection. We have a core stream. This is going to have trial assessors complete all elements of the assessment, including on-site data collection and the use of the trial energy rating tool. They'll produce a rating and provide some simple upgrade advice to trial households. The trial assessors from the core stream will be critical for the initial pool of NatHERS assessors for existing homes at launch. In the scale stream, we're working with property valuers to perform on-site data collection and then NatHERS accredited assessors for new homes to complete the assessment off-site and produce an accredited rating. No upgrade advice will be provided. This approach is to test a possible option for delivering ratings for mandatory disclosure fast and at scale, while still ensuring consistency and reliability of ratings and results. One of the key principles of the expanded scheme is to keep the cost of assessments to a minimum, to keep costs low, while ensuring accurate and reliable ratings are provided. And the findings from these trials will help shape the scheme towards launch and beyond. I'll now take you through the proposed home energy rating certificate. Here we have the two NatHERS certificates shown together. The new home certificate on the left has traditionally been used to demonstrate compliance with the National Construction Code and is used by around 90% of building approvals nationally. The existing home certificate builds on the new home certificate, but is focused on key information for consumers and other end users. Both certificates provide information for households on the greenhouse gas emissions of a home, the energy used by major appliances, and the impact of solar and batteries. This will help householders understand their home's overall energy performance, helping them to improve the comfort of their home while reducing energy bills. The key point to note about this process is that the certificate outputs are very similar to that used for new building, which overcomes confusion in the marketplace. We're consulting on two options for the home energy rating certificate. This slide shows option 1. It might be a bit hard to read there, but shortly I'll step you through each of the key features in more detail. This is the second option for the home energy rating certificate. It's probably useful to note that the data and inclusions are the same for both options. There's really just a different option for the layout and structure. The draft home energy rating certificate has been informed by market research and stakeholder consultation, research reports and international best practice energy rating programs, the technical feasibility, available data and tool capability to deliver for launch in mid-2025. And we've also looked at the preferred objectives for NatHERS for existing homes, including comparability to current new home ratings, as well as consumer and industry needs, advice on readability, language and terminology. The certificate will be further improved after launch and based on research and testing, insight from trials, and additional tool and data functionality as it becomes available. We've proposed that as a minimum, the existing home certificate would include all of these features at launch. The aim is to provide data and information for as many of the identified drivers of use while still keeping the certificate easy for consumers to understand. So you'll see here on the slide, we have all of the features listed, the reason for their inclusion, as well as the example data and metrics. So we'll be presenting a thermal rating, which is your star rating, the whole home performance rating and the score out of 100, as well as property information, assessor information, key inputs and assumptions, which I'll talk more about shortly, the information on appliance efficiency, again, I'll talk more about that shortly, as well as home comfort. So as you will have seen from the two certificate options presented earlier, we've got two different ways we could present the rating information. We really want your feedback on these, including if there are other options we haven't considered. So the current certificate for new home includes two ratings, a thermal performance rating, which is the building shell, and one which is for the entire home. So for the thermal performance or star rating, energy assessors use the modelling tools to predict the amount of heating and cooling your home or apartment will need to stay comfortable all year round. This is based on the home's design, materials and construction, including the layout of the home, its orientation, the roof, walls, window, floor, construction methods and materials, as well as shading from the sun and how well the home takes advantage of cross flow and local breezes. The findings are then converted into a rating between 0 and 10 stars, which is specific to the home and is based on standard behaviour and occupancy settings to ensure a like-for-like comparison. NatHERS assessments also include an indication of the performance of the whole home. So the energy use is based on an assessment of the home's thermal performance, its fixed appliances such as heating and cooling and hot water systems, and any offsets provided by solar PV and batteries. We're really keen to get your feedback on how you think consumers would best engage with ratings. In terms of the key inputs and assumptions, the certificate proposes to include all relevant construction details, so floor area, wall type, floor type, roof type, window type, insulation type, and also its value. It would also identify where tool assumptions have been used, so that includes energy tariffs, emission coefficients, conditioning profiles, etc. Given behavioural variability, energy bills cannot be used to determine the energy performance of the home. So NatHERS assigns consistent occupancy and condition profiles that are adjusted for area factors and climate zones for the purpose of comparability and consistency. This is paramount to user understanding and comparison. So we've designed this section of the certificate to meet the requirements under the disclosure framework, which proposes an outline of the characteristics and assumptions underpinning the rating be available. But we anticipate this information will also be useful to support financing and rebates. In terms of energy use, we've provided information about the different types of fixed appliances that were present during the assessment. The breakdown shown here of energy use by appliance type aligns with the approach taken in the new home certificate. The breakdown of energy use is taken from total energy use predicted for that home and based on standard occupancy profiles. The graphs are included to help households understand where they're using energy in the home and to help with that activity of prioritising appliance upgrades or even just changing behaviour, such as using those appliances that use a lot of energy just differently. We're also planning for future enhancements. So one of the key things we heard during the market research was that consumers want to understand how their home performs, especially when compared to others. So we're planning for the inclusion of benchmarking to support this interest, but it will need to be considered once there is sufficient assessment data available to provide a reasonable benchmark. We anticipate also a range of learning to come through the disclosure pilots and NatHERS trials, and that will also be considered as part of an ongoing enhancement plan. I'll now take you through the proposed approach to upgrade advice for the expanded scheme. At launch in mid-2025, home energy rating certificates will include generic home upgrade advice for each of the 8 National Construction Code climate zones. This advice will be linked to a home's assessment so that only relevant upgrades appear in the advice. This will include thermal envelope and appliance upgrades with highlighted quick wins appropriate to the home's climate. These upgrades will be tool-driven to ensure advice is relevant and that impractical upgrades are excluded. For example, underfloor insulation would not be recommended if the home is built on a concrete slab. We'll also be providing general advice and guidance, and that'll link households to available rebates and key resources. And lastly, we'll be providing a section around energy saving tips to help households operate their homes efficiently. This may include tips on things like selecting air conditioning temperatures, the use of curtains and ventilation strategies, and these tips will also be optimised for climate and independent of the energy ratings. Upgrade advice will empower Australian households to take action to improve their home's energy performance and benefit from reduced bills, improved comfort and health outcomes. We want to provide advice that is realistic, impactful and cost-effective. To do this, the approach to upgrade advice has been informed from insights from international best practice, the Residential Efficiency Scorecard, as well as the ClimateWorks Renovations Pathways project and extensive consumer market research and behavioural insights work. Upgrade advice categories will include thermal performance and appliance upgrades, as well as information on on-site generation and storage. To help households plan and prioritise, advice will include quick win options that can be implemented at low cost and without too much planning. Quick wins may include upgrades such as draft ceiling, ceiling insulation and window coverings. The proposed approach to generic upgrade advice can help support net zero ready existing homes through encouraging voluntary electrification of fixed appliances at end of life. Although upgrade advice will be generic to the 8 National Construction Code climate zones and automatically generated based on assessment inputs, assessors will still play an important role. They'll collect data on site, complete the home's rating using an accredited NatHERS tool, and provide the certificate and tool-generated advice to households. The inclusion of standardised advice on certificates supports scaling the scheme. In some settings, such as disclosure of energy ratings at point of sale or lease, there may not be a homeowner present. Having basic climate-tailored upgrade advice included as part of the certificate that's passed on to any potential buyer helps to ensure all rated households have the access to the same basic upgrade information. Motivated households may want to engage an assessor to provide detailed home-specific advice and upgrade planning. Assessors and tool providers will be able to meet this need by offering services above the basic assessment. This advice would be in addition to the home energy rating process and sit outside of the scheme. So to sum up, for launch we will deliver generic upgrade advice for each of the 8 National Construction Code climate zones that's linked to a home's assessment information with only relevant upgrades appearing in the advice. Post-launch, we're intending to enhance the upgrade offering. This work would be informed by behavioural insights testing and stakeholder feedback. So exactly what it looks like depends on your input. And we look forward to seeing that through this consultation process. I'll now hand over to my colleague Felicity Woodhams, who'll take us through the communications section.
Hello everyone, I'm Felicity Woodhams, Director of the Home Energy Transition Engagement Team. my team has been developing a strategy that covers the broader communication needs of the expansion of NatHERS to existing homes, which I will talk to you about today. The strategy details the engagement and communication principles and broad approach the Commonwealth will take to support the introduction of energy ratings and assessments for existing homes and the disclosure of these energy ratings into the market as outlined in the disclosure framework. The strategy aims to outline an approach to clear, simple, timely and coordinated communications under three primary functions shown in the next slide. It will articulate an overarching narrative that can be delivered through several channels by the Commonwealth and, as appropriate, by state and territory governments and other delivery partners. It will outline proposed engagement approaches, channels and messages for a range of different user segments based on best practice principles and learnings from research. We will be engaging further with stakeholders through the process of strategy development. Up till now, communications and engagement for NatHERS has focused on providing information to industry stakeholders and delivery partners. Future engagement and communications efforts will be focused on households and will be coupled with enhancing capacity in commercial sectors who directly participate in energy assessments, ratings, green finance and upgrades. This slide shows the three primary functions of the strategy for existing homes and disclosure. The strategy is proposed to run over 3 to 4 years. The initial focus in year 1 and 2 will be on providing support and communications tools to current stakeholders and delivery partners and upskilling identified stakeholders in the market enablement phase who may be new to residential energy rating schemes. Years 2 to 4 are focused on raising awareness with households on the benefits of comfort, health and cost that can be found in homes that are energy efficient, building household participation in energy ratings and linking those households to other opportunities available to homes with ratings. It will target information at key decision points, for example, purchasing, leasing or renovating a home. We are taking a staged approach to the development and delivery of the strategy. This is because there are a number of projects that are informing its development. There are two main projects. First, a user journey mapping project, which will help identify and describe the different user segments that may seek, obtain and act on energy ratings, and will provide a capability, opportunity, motivation framework or COM-B model, which will outline communications recommendations to best engage these segments. Second, a behavioural insights project specifically focused on upgrades and disclosure. This project will help establish behavioural interventions that will encourage and empower homeowners, buyers, sellers, investors, landlords and renters to implement energy performance upgrades and disclose home energy ratings at point of sale or lease. Further information will come from the NatHERS for Existing Homes and Disclosure pilots mentioned earlier in this presentation. A NatHERS website review, which has concluded recently, will provide key recommendations on how to improve the NatHERS website to meet the needs of a consumer audience. And finally, recent research has found that the name Nationwide House Energy Rating Scheme and the acronym NatHERS does not resonate strongly with a consumer audience. So we are currently considering changing to a new consumer-facing name of Home Energy Ratings. It is important to note that NatHERS and the full name and acronym would be retained for administration, governance and industry activities. All these pieces of the puzzle will help inform an update to the strategy in late 2024, when the strategy will be supplemented with a communications implementation plan. This plan will provide detailed timelines, activities, channels and messages for each of the identified user segments. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you to Joe and Felicity for their presentations, and hopefully for you that has answered many of your questions out there. Before moving to the Slido part of today's webinar, I will just introduce and invite back our panel members so if they can turn on their cameras and their audio. So firstly, we have Joe Brennan. Joe leads our program design team for existing homes. We also have Felicity Woodhams, who you just heard from about communications activities. Felicity leads our home energy transition engagement team. And our final panel member, who you haven't heard from yet, is Grady Peterson. Grady is leading the work that we're doing on the certificate development and upgrade. So welcome to the panel. As you can see again on the screen, the way that we're undertaking the question and answer part of this is through Slido. With so many people attending the session today, it becomes a little bit unwieldy, frankly, on Teams. So we are using Slido. You can access Slido in two ways. The first option is to scan the QR code and follow the prompts. Alternatively, as I said earlier, you can visit www.slido.com and then enter the NatHERS code into the box. Also, if you can't connect to Slido and have a question, you can email admin@nathers.gov.au and we'll aim to either transfer your question across or we'll ensure that you get answers to your questions as a follow-up to this session. We do ask, as I mentioned earlier, that you include your name and organisation if applicable with your question. It just helps us to follow up with you, especially if we run out of time or we need to take it on notice and come back to you. So there will be an emphasis on that. And also, don't be alarmed if you don't see your question appear. Please be patient and bear with us. There's a very busy team in the background endeavouring to make sure that we respond to all the questions, filtering out any duplication just so that we can get to as many new issues as possible, and we'll go from there. So with that, we'll switch to Slido. All right. So the first question from Marcelo is, how can NatHERS for existing homes compare with NatHERS for new homes and give a consistent result when the information entered is different? So it's probably worth noting that a key objective here for us is ensuring consistency and comparability of ratings, including across new and existing homes. The existing and the new homes mode of the tool will use the same base calculation settings for things like thermal and the same whole of home calculation method to maintain as much alignment as possible. There are a number of assumptions and settings that are specific to new homes that we've been workshopping with our technical experts that'll be built into the Accurate Enterprise and existing homes mode to support trials and testing, and they'll be documented as well and available. So this is probably a great question if you've got any follow-ups in the tools and accreditation webinar that will be running next week. But certainly our intention in expanding to existing homes is to ensure that there is maximum consistency and comparability across the two. So we'll move on to the next question, which is from Rob. Will this tool be able to demonstrate compliance with DTS in the National Construction Code, alterations and additions for states like Victoria? There's a massive disconnect between what building surveyors expect to see and solutions provided by assessors. That's possibly a question again for next week's webinar. But if there's a general steer we can give you today, then we can certainly try to do that. I might hand over to Joe firstly, just to see if there's anything we are in a position to add today, Joe.
Look, I'd say at this stage, our priority in expanding the scheme is to get ratings into the market, into the voluntary market. And I think, we'll just continue to be working with our state and territory colleagues on potential end users, including looking at options for the future, but there's certainly not any intention in the short term, and it really would be a matter for the Victorian government. So I think that's probably all we can say about that one for the time being.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks, Rob, for the question. So moving on to the next one from Romney. How do existing assessors become involved in pilots? Thanks for the question. Jo, back to you.
Yeah, no, that's great. We're keen to hear from you if you are interested in being involved in our trials or pilots. Just email us at admin@nathers.gov.au. We'll be compiling interested people through that. We're also planning to put out an expression of interest, so you could also wait until sort of that goes out. And we'll be looking to put something on the web around that as well. So but if you are interested now, please reach out and we'll make sure we add your name to the list.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks again for the question. Next question is from John. What is proposed that is different from what Scorecard does already? Look, I think, what the government's committed is to expand the nationwide house energy rating scheme to existing homes. It's already available nationally, and the preferred method for rating new home builds. The opportunity here is to, increase that transparency in the market and empower households to better understand the energy performance of their house where they're in an existing home, and to really maximise the opportunity around consistency and comparability of ratings. Scorecard obviously has been in the market for some time. It's not an accredited NatHERS tool, and we'll obviously be continuing to work with the Victorian government as part of transition. But Jo, anything you wanted to add on that at this stage?
I think you've covered it off pretty well there, Chris, and what we've been doing over the years has been working closely with the Scorecard team and leveraging all the great work and experience of that scheme, and so you'll see a lot of the knowledge and development that's gone into Scorecard sort of translating where it is nationally applicable, so to the NatHERS scheme, that is. So yeah, so I think, mainly it is that issue around comparability with the ratings and like-for-like comparison that's been seen to be an advantage, and why governments have committed to NatHERS as the underpinning rating scheme for disclosure based on a range of criteria and principles. So so I think that's probably covers that one off, Chris.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks, John, for the question. Next one is anonymous. How much will assessments for existing homes cost, and can this be subsidised? Will there be a two-step process to reevaluate ratings after upgrades are implemented? It's a pretty good question in terms of consumer experience. Jo or Grady, did you want to have a crack at that one?
I'll kick off, and Grady can probably jump in as well. So at the moment, we're running some field trials, which I mentioned there in the presentation. So a core stream and a scale stream, and I think that's going to help us get a better indicator of what the market might look at costing for an existing homes assessment. In terms of subsidies, we know there already are some subsidies available for assessments at the state level. I think, it'll be a matter to see where that goes in the future and whether there are additional subsidies offered. In terms of a two-step process to reevaluate ratings after upgrades are implemented, there would be a need to check and validate what upgrade has been installed or implemented, and but some of that could be simplified. If, say, for example, if you're using the same assessor, they would already have all of the information related to that original assessment, and may be able to update that assessment and rating based on a smaller amount of information and evidence. So we think that will be a fairly straightforward thing. I think the advantage there is that we'll be able to provide, we've been talking to the finance sector. We know there is interest in being able to account for how much abatement's been achieved, if there's been low cost financing provided for an upgrade or something along those lines. And so you will be able to get that data through NatHERS on the abatement.
Thanks, Jo. So we'll move on to the next question from Cecile, who asks, deep in the consultation, are we able to see samples of the home energy rating certificates for, say, a 2 or 3 star rating home, which is what most homeowners are likely to receive rather than a 7-star sample, which is a high rating, or would be a high rating for an existing home? It's a good question, Cecile. I know that in the consultation paper we do have a couple of options on display. I imagine they would adjust depending on the ratings, but and it's obviously difficult when you've got a static document to be able to show how it looks for different star ratings, but certainly the intention there was to provide some clarity around the format and the level of information available in that rating and upgrade advice. But Grady, is there anything you wanted to add there?
I think you've covered it pretty much. We don't have anything pre-prepared in terms of having the certificate at different star rating set points. What you see in the consultation is a bit of a pick and mix of options. So we welcome feedback on all of the individual inclusions and which pieces you may prefer and which pieces you might not like as much or have specific comments on. But I can probably see if we can mock up a couple of different options for you. I'll have to have some conversations with our graphic designer, but at the moment the certificates aren't linked to it's not linked to a specific home or assessment as such. It's just a design to look at.
Thanks, Grady.
What I would,
Jo?
sorry, Cecile, just add to that is that there will be an opportunity during the trials to present the trial participants with a trial certificate, which will be pretty basic to start with, but it will include the key information that we would be providing through a real certificate at launch. So that'll also provide that sort of that first sense of how those homeowners are responding to the information, which would relate to the actual features of their home. So we'd expect to see a few of those, lower ratings coming through the trial as well. So it'll be really good to get that real world feedback from the trial participants.
Yeah, thanks, Jo, and thanks, Cecile, for the question. I think probably what we're testing as much anything at the moment is the look and feel and the level of information and how useful that is, but certainly opportunities to refine this down the track. The next question is from Mick regarding insulation and potential use of default information. We might hold that one over for the tools webinar. That's probably a slightly more technical question, but we will definitely hold that one over for you, Mick, and you're welcome to attend that session. The next question is from Deanne at DECA. If one of the aims is to improve houses and emissions, why is the upgrades advice not tailored to the homes rather than across 8 climate zones? Jo, did you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Deanne. So, one of the aims, yes, is to improve, home performance and reduce emissions. It's also to provide, like-for-like ratings across Australia, and for new and existing homes to have those comparable, consistent ratings. So lots of different objectives there. In terms of the advice not being tailored to the home, you might have seen in the presentation that we are looking at the building topology and the assessment inputs around those elements of the home to ensure that the advice is actually
relevant and cost effective and achievable. So there is that part of the upgrade advice, design and approach. At this stage, we've focused on the 8 climate zones because we think that gives enough differentiation from a climate tailoring perspective. But we definitely welcome any feedback you might have on that approach in terms of, the climate zones and the approach to that NCC approach as well. But Grady, did you want to add to that?
I can probably add that when we say that it's kind of generic to the 8 climate zones, it's that we won't have like a full parametric model assessing, the best combination of upgrades for every individual home. We'll kind of have upgrade advice sets that are suitable across NCC climate zones, and will be based on the home's assessment data. So it will show specific types of wall insulation upgrades for specific types of walls, as an example, or it might not show, an option for under slab insulation for insulating under floors if the house is on a, built with slab on ground. So it is a little bit generic, but it is actually kind of specific to the home. It functions very similarly, or the intention is for it to function and operate very similarly to how Scorecard's upgrade advice is and comes across. And the things that we don't have is which specific walls you might want to upgrade your insulation for, or that sort of thing. It won't be down to that individual upgrade level. It will be just a little bit above that, but still quite specific to the home.
Thanks, Grady, and thanks, Joe, for that, and thanks, Deanne, for your question. Next question is from John, who asks a great question. Is there any firm timeline outside of the ACT to have a home energy rating compulsory at sale or lease of a home? Why do we have compulsory star ratings for cars and fridges, but not for homes? So interesting you asked that question, John, because we are currently separate to consultations on expanding NatHERS to existing homes. We, on behalf of all jurisdictions, are currently consulting on the next iteration of the Home Energy Ratings Disclosure Framework, which provides national parameters for disclosure of home energy ratings at the point of sale or lease. And the idea of that is to facilitate nationally consistent approaches to disclosure of home energy ratings. And it's been developed with the support of our stakeholders through the established governance forums. The intent of it is to facilitate nationally consistent approaches, as I said, but it is a matter for individual states and territories to determine when and if they will implement compulsory or mandatory disclosure of home energy ratings. But certainly we know that there is a great opportunity through disclosure of home energy ratings to really improve transparency in the market and to genuinely empower households to better understand the energy performance of a home, to make more informed choices when buying and selling, and also to be able to access information on cost-effective upgrades that can be made to improve the energy performance of their homes. So not quite a full answer to your question, John, but that is the approach that we're taking at the national level at the moment. And thank you very much for your question. Next question is from Dr. Clyde Anderson. Most homes that I have assessed that are thermally uncomfortable have poor ceiling insulation installed. This was visible using a thermal camera to guide correction work. Can thermal cameras be included? That might be a question to hold over for the tools and technical session next week. But certainly the intention will be to have clear guidance for assessors on how to input data to enable the ratings. And thanks, Dr. Anderson, for that one. Just moving on to the next question from Di. How long do we expect an inspection to take for the consumer, and is there any interview or survey style data required from the consumer directly that can't be captured on site? It's a great question, Di. I might hand over to Joe in the first instance on that one.
Thanks for that question. Look, we're really getting some key data on the time taken for the home energy rating assessment through the field trials. What we've seen from some initial data from our first phase of the trials, which we're still working through the data from that at the moment. So I don't have, results available for you, but indicatively is that we're looking at about between 20 and 30 minutes needed to collect the relevant data on site. That in terms of actual extra data that might be needed from a consumer that can't be captured on site, no, because we're planning for this scheme to be basically enabled whether there's a homeowner available in the property or not. We think, in order to support disclosure initiatives, there might be different scenarios where there's actually no tenant in the property, or the homeowners already moved, or they're not there. And so that goes to 2 points. One, why we want to have the certificate and the upgrade advice provided so that that can be passed on to the next person occupying that property, but also so that we don't have to rely on the actual householder to be present during the assessment. And that's to try and streamline some of that, some of those processes to enable scale and to support some of those disclosure ambitions. Hopefully that's captured your question, Di.
As best we can today anyway, but thanks, Joe. We'll move on to the next question from Jared, who asks, as a scorecard assessor, I frequently use the hot cold weather comfort ratings in the certificate to guide how I tackle improvement options and pathways for clients. Is there a similar ability in this system? Grady, did you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, so what we have on our current certificate, so I'll take a step back. So market research has revealed that households really find linking thermal performance to comfort quite useful, but they really didn't like having an additional rating or metric or the split hot and cold weather ratings on the certificate in addition to the NatHERS rating and the whole of home rating. However, what we've developed, and you can have a look at the draft certificate, is a Goldilocks zone indicator for home comfort that's linked back to free run mode temperatures in the home and is designed to give households an understanding of how comfortable their home might be without heating or cooling. Its inclusion provides additional point of reference for households that enables them to better understand star ratings, help prioritize and optimize upgrades based on whether the home, suffers more from heat stress or cool stress, and gives a really good idea of how much time across the year that home might be comfortable without additional heating or cooling. So we welcome any feedback on that because it is a relatively new metric, but it is really, it's a good response to that. Similarly, we have the NatHERS heating and cooling loads and things like that also exist that can help you as an assessor with planning upgrades.
Thanks, Grady. Much appreciated. So the next question's anonymous. Are there any plans for making the NatHERS ratings available for third parties to access, such as banks? Joe?
So look, what I'd say at the moment is that we're working through the field trials to see what the opportunities are with the finance sector for NatHERS ratings and integrating those into, looking at how consumer products could integrate and other avenues. In terms of making ratings available for third parties, at the moment, the trial is the main avenue that we're using to test that, whether we can, how easy it is to make ratings available. We're looking at different ways to transfer data and looking at the workflows and other things to try and better understand what the benefits would be the preferences would be around data access for NatHERS ratings. At the moment, NatHERS ratings are already available on the Australian Housing Database, so that's a great resource in terms of at the more aggregated level. But yeah, I think, we'll continue to look at how we can enhance the Australian Housing Data Portal with additional data, particularly as we start to move into the existing home space. And we definitely welcome feedback on that if you have an interest. But essentially, yeah, the trials are looking at a lot of this at the moment in terms of third-party access to ratings. What we've been saying is that, you would need a full NatHERS rating, to underpin individual loan products if you're going to sort of base the financing on that. So that's one of the principles we've been looking at more recently.
Thanks, Jo. The next question is from Daryl. When will training be made available, and will it be similar to the scorecard training regime? So thanks, Daryl, for the question. It's certainly an important focus for us and in our discussions with Victoria as well, providing pathways for scorecard assessors to, I guess, leverage the lessons learned and the experiences of scorecard is something that is very front of mind for us. Jo, is there anything you wanted to add there?
Just a shout out for the assessor services webinar, probably, which will go into training and accreditation processes in more detail. So really encourage you, Daryl, to come along to that webinar if you can, or watch it following. Essentially, we have, not only leveraged the approaches of the scorecard and the training regime there, but also worked across all governments and through industry advisory groups and through relevant skills councils and the like to determine a proposal for the minimum qualifications and training for a NatHERS existing assessor, and we really welcome your feedback on that proposal. It's also outlined in the consultation paper, so you can, if you can't make the webinar on Monday, the 12th, hopefully I've got that date right, Monday the 12th, then please do engage with the consultation paper, and we will welcome your views on what that how that looks to you.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks, Daryl, for the question. The next question we have is from Dave. If an assessment was carried out when a home was built and then another one was undertaken for it as an existing home and there was a significant variance in the assessment, what would happen? Dave, it's an interesting question. It's difficult to answer sort of in the broad and in a hypothetical scenario. There are the new home rating and the trigger for a new home rating obviously relates to new build regulations. There could be perfectly valid reasons why at some point down the track why the same home assessed later using the NatHERS tool had a different rating. It could be for reasons of upgrades or other things. So it's difficult to answer that in the broad or hypothetically, but certainly that's one of the exciting opportunities with expanding NatHERS to existing homes, is that you could a homeowner may wish to have a rating done, act on the upgrade advice, and then have another one done later if they choose to. But thanks for the question. Next question is, what type of platforms will be used for accredited assessors for existing homes? So that is going to be a key focus for the tools and accreditation webinar that is coming up next week. Next question is, are you able to talk more about the type of pilots or trials that are currently or will be running to validate the new NatHERS certificate for existing homes? Type of scale, stakeholders, postcodes, methodology, timeframes. We could probably talk generally, I think, today, Jo.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. We are finalising the sort of scope of the trial at the larger scale trial at the moment. I think as I mentioned in the presentation, we've got 2 streams of trials occurring over this period, and that will be to achieve multiple goals. So we've got a core stream that's really looking at, the machinery of NatHERS to ensure that it's, the tools are working effectively, that the data flows are working, that the assurance elements are working. That'll be part of the core stream. So that will be like an end-to-end, essentially, in preparation for launch. So it'll be trialing all of the in a trial setting, all of those elements of the scheme that would be available at launch. And we'll get some really great data from that to ensure, we can make any adjustments before we do take a final design forward for launch. In terms of the scale stream, that focus is with the finance sector, and we're working with that sector at the moment to I suppose map out what scale we'll be delivering that one at. And at the moment that's focused on using property valuers in the system to support demonstration of scale. In terms of postcodes and methods and things, look, we are planning to do a bit more of a deep dive on trials once we've got a few more of the elements ready to talk about in more detail, because we know people have a lot of questions about the training and things like that. So maybe if you let us know your details, we can keep you updated on those future opportunities as well. But we are looking to get, good representative samples across the country so that we can make sure that we're, that the tools and processes are able to operate effectively across, all climate zones, etc. So that's probably enough for today. And yeah, we'll keep you updated if you're interested.
Thanks, Jo. So the next question is from Sabina. In South Australia, fewer than 30% of new building approvals use NatHERS for compliance. How will we create an accredited assessor workforce for existing homes while there is such resistance from the industry? Help needed. Thanks, Sabina. So obviously, although I appreciate that you would be very familiar with this, obviously we are talking about existing homes rather than new home plans and needing to demonstrate compliance with the energy performance requirements under the National Construction Code. But we are obviously very mindful and focused as part of the expansion around making sure that we do have, at least at launch, an initial pool of trained and accredited assessors, and for that to evolve over time as well. And obviously, we think there's a fantastic opportunity for households. I think expanding to existing homes, as Felicity was touching on in her presentation, this is really an opportunity for consumers to be directly engaged in relation to understanding energy performance and being able to access upgrade advice. And the role of accredited trained assessors will be really invaluable there in not just undertaking the ratings and assessment, but in providing a service to households. Felicity, is there anything that you wanted to add at this point on the communication side of things?
Thanks, Chris. Only that we will obviously be stepping through the communications needs that we need to prepare for assessors, as well as those that we need for households through the communications strategy. Those needs will be informed by the pilots, as Jo was stepping out before, as well as the research activities we've currently got underway. So that strategy will firm up towards the end of this year, and we'll have a lot more detail to put around what we'll be putting out for assessors, as well as for consumers.
Thanks, Felicity, and thanks, Sabina, for the question. Next question's from Shane. Is there any data or information available regarding anticipated number of assessments that will be needed to be completed nationwide and an expected number of accredited assessors to assist in meeting this demand? So this may well be something that carries on through the subsequent webinars, but obviously, you know, as we're all aware, there's a very large number of, well, the existing housing stock is obviously very large. It's much larger than compared to the number of new homes built each year. To an extent, it will be demand driven, and it's something that will, you know, be scalable over time. But Jo, is there anything you wanted to add at this point?
Yeah, like what I would say here is that, you know, we have good indications from the current market and the demand, you know, profiles for the scorecard program as to what that voluntary market looks like. You know, we continue to work closely with the state and territory governments around other demand drivers. We do know that, you know, we're doing around 150 to 200,000 assessments per year for new homes. And, you know, we've got those 800 accredited assessors out there working under the scheme. We know we'll need to scale, you know, to 700,000 plus in a situation where that is assessments per year, in a scenario where there was disclosure initiatives, for example. So we have been looking at the different types of demand drivers and profiles and what that might mean for numbers of assessments and therefore assessors, and that's also feeding through into our the design of our workforce transition strategy. So that's a really important part of us being able to ensure, you know, that we've got the right enabling mechanisms to get, you know, assessors in, and that you've got the right balance between accreditation requirements, training requirements, and also the need to scale. So yeah, I think it's a great question, but yeah, we are working closely with the states and territories around sort of ensuring we can map out the different scenarios.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks, Shane, for the question. The next question, and apologies if I mispronounce your name, from Nimasha, is occupant behaviour significantly influences the energy consumption of residential buildings. How do you plan to address and mitigate the impact of occupant behaviour in your energy efficiency assessment? Thanks for the question. It's probably something that we can get into in a bit more detail in our last webinar. But what I would say is, you know, NatHERS is designed to provide a rating that is consistent and comparable between homes. And to do this, ratings are based on the specifics of a home's designs, construction materials, the climate, appliances, but it also uses standardized assumptions for occupant behaviour. And these assumptions are based on, you know, best available data. And although they may not reflect the reality of how every single individual household lives in their home every single day, they do help to ensure ratings are calculated with consistent assumptions and are comparable between homes. Grady, I think you wanted to jump in.
I think in addition to that, we do recognise the importance of occupant behaviour and that people do wildly different things when they're living in their homes. And I'm a really bad example of how to live in a house efficiently. So I know from personal experience. But one of the things that we are including on our upgrade advice, or one of the things that we're intending to include, is energy saving tips. And these will be behavioural tips to help households better operate their homes. These could include things like advice on time shifting, advice on operation of heating and cooling systems, selecting appropriate temperatures, when to use blinds and external shading and things like that. So we're trying to include a little bit of introductory kind of how do I operate my building information. And although this won't impact the rating, it will help households make savings and be more comfortable in their homes.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that. Thanks, Grady and Chris. But also, I think I touched on the important role of the assessor as well in the whole scheme. So in addition to everything that Grady's just mentioned on the home upgrade advice, there is the important role of the assessor to help really tailor to specific household drivers and motivations. And we envisage those services would be part of the broader market environment and offerings. And, we know that the scorecard assessors and other assessors are there with expertise and knowledge and able to, step in and offer those needs for the motivated households who are really looking to tailor to their own specific occupancy profiles, if you like. It's just, that just wouldn't provide at a national level, you wouldn't be able to sort of compare building to building if you took into account the different occupant profiles of those people living in the house at that particular time, because they do vary so significantly. But assessors play a very critical role in supporting the tailoring and ensuring that homeowners can benefit from tailored advice as well.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for the question. The next question is from Janet, who asks, assessments of vital education and awareness. We need scale, especially with disclosure, but time with clients is key, and for landlords and sellers. Can retrofit variations be run? I assume both of these are outside the remit of NatHERS. I'm not entirely sure what you're after here, Janet. I might look to my panel and see if there's anything we can add. Grady.
Yeah, so I guess we are designing the scheme to underpin disclosure, to underpin finance initiatives and things like that. So, the basic assessment doesn't require the assessor to run variations to work out retrofit settings or anything like that. So that will happen outside of the NatHERS rating process. So in a disclosure scenario, someone may order an assessment because they're selling their house. They might not want to know anything more. The real estate agent will let them in, they get the assessment. That will be the baseline NatHERS rating for disclosure. And then anything additional to that, really detailed upgrade advice, running of different simulations to work out the appropriate upgrade settings and things like that. That will be an opportunity for assessors to have a value add. So their business could offer tailored upgrade advice planning and retrofit activities, similar to what a lot of scorecard assessors do at the moment. Or they may just offer that base, bones rating because I need to have my disclosure for selling the house. So the option to do those variations and work with the tools will be there.
Thanks, Grady. And thanks, Janet, for the question. The next question is from Brad, who asks about how remote properties will be dealt with when this becomes mandatory. Thanks for the question, Brad. And just to be clear, what we're not talking about here is mandating existing home ratings using NatHERS. Obviously, we are consulting separately, as I said earlier, on the next iteration of the Home Energy Ratings Disclosure Framework, which provides settings and policy parameters for how, if a jurisdiction decided to implement mandatory disclosure of home energy ratings, how that might proceed. But ultimately, as I said, the decision on when and if to implement disclosure of home energy ratings is a matter for each individual jurisdiction. And as you'd imagine, a key consideration would be the availability of a workforce and the market readiness for such a regime. But certainly we think there's a great opportunity in expanding NatHERS to existing homes to get that national reach. But we're not talking about mandating home ratings here, just to be clear. But thanks for the question, Brad. The next question is from Dave, who asks if detailed configurations are known, will default values be provided for assessments? Grady, did you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, so I'll probably not answer the majority of that question in favour of leaving it for the Tools and Technical webinar, where they'll discuss this in detail and the technical and guidance notes that will be available for assessors. But what I will comment on is the draft certificate you may notice under our building or thermal performance inclusions there. So those walls, floors, ceilings, building elements, you'll see some of them may say assumed, some of them may say measured or documented. So we are enabling that information to be on the certificates. So households will be aware of how the data is collected and whether it was an assumption because we can't get inside that wall to see if there's insulation or not, or whether, you know, it was measured, we hopped up into the ceiling with our tape measure and found out it was R4, or documented the homeowner had the NatHERS rating from when that house was constructed years and years ago. We can use that as a documented figure for insulation, but it will be displayed on the certificates. So if you're going to help a household plan upgrades, you'll know where that data's come from up front.
Thanks, Grady. And yeah, I think there are probably quite a few questions coming through that will be more relevant to next week's webinar, and certainly don't want to discourage the interest. It's fantastic to have that engagement, but we're certainly doing our best to cover that off with the panel we have before us focused on consumer experience. The next question from Stephen may fall into that category. Is there an opportunity to import energy meter data within the assessment to provide a further perspective of detail and tailored recommendations on behaviour to the residents? Grady, I think some of the advice you provided earlier on what will be available and how it can be used is relevant here. Did you want to just kind of reiterate that?
Yeah, so with energy meter data, obviously, or not obviously, but the way that NatHERS assessments work is using the default assumptions for occupant behaviour, so all assessments can be consistent. So there'll be no need to import energy meter data. However, there's nothing preventing yourself as an assessor or a tool provider to develop a front end that has the ability to play around with energy meter data and create more tailored options or really solid advice on shifting time of use and things like that. NatHERS Whole of Home already does have a number of time of use assumptions in there, but because ratings have to use default assumptions for occupancy behaviour to be comparable, NatHERS ratings don't play with energy meter data at this stage.
Thanks, Grady. The next question is anonymous. What work is being done to demonstrate the value of the star rating to the homeowner? Is there an uplift conversation to be had, and how do we incentivize homeowners to implement the upgrades? Look, it's an interesting question, and I think actually we provided a lot of information today that does go to this very question. And I think what you would have seen is that what we're offering or what we're proposing in terms of the existing homes assessment is much more than just a star rating. There's the thermal performance rating, there's the whole of home rating, but there's also quite a lot of other really useful information for the homeowner in terms of energy use, comfort factors, and also the proposed information that will be provided in relation to upgrades that can be made, or quick wins that you could undertake to reduce your energy consumption and therefore costs, and also improve comfort. So obviously we want this information to be useful and accessible information for homeowners. The star rating and the whole of home rating is one part, and that's also really important in terms of comparability and consistency of ratings across new homes and existing homes, and having a better understanding of Australia's housing stock, which has a range of benefits down the track, including being able to better inform and target programs and policies that can assist homeowners. So it's a good question, and the great news is that there's much more here than just ratings that we're providing. All right, next question from Emily. Do you anticipate fast-track assessor training for existing scorecard and NatHERS assessors? That is something that we're very focused on, Emily, and hold your question over because we'll focus on that in one of the next 7 webinars. But thanks for the question. Next one is from Dave. Is NatHERS planning to deal with additions and alterations building projects under current or future needs? Joe, did you have a go at that one?
Yeah, look, I think for this one, yeah, a lot of this would be subject to the state or territory requirements around, additions, alterations, and renovations, and how they trigger respective building regulations in each of the states and territories. So it's probably not one we can answer clearly here today. What I would say though is that, we're hopeful, as I talked about, there's a whole range of different drivers for the need for ratings for existing homes, and the assessment information that underpins that rating. And that will, continue to work with state and territory governments on the potential use cases for the scheme, and and including whether it's fit for purpose for those various end uses. We have already worked around, subsidy programs and incentive programs and things like that, and I think we talked through some of the features on the certificate that are intended to support those needs, as well as doing a lot of work with the finance sector, including through the trials, to understand what the need is there for NatHERS ratings and assessment information and data flows. But yeah, in terms of the renovations, alterations, additions question, that's, ultimately going to be a matter for state and territory governments in the future once the scheme is operational, and whether it might be suitable for additional purposes such as those.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Dave, for the question. And the last question is from Sabrina. Will our current license cover access to this part of the software? So, Sabrina, I'm very sorry, but that's a question we'll have to hold over to the tools and the tools webinar next week, just to make sure that we can provide as much information as we can on that. So I think that's all the time we have today for questions. I think we've had pretty much a good solid hour of questions on Slido, so that's been fantastic, and we really appreciate your time and thoughtful questions today. And my thanks to the panel, so to Felicity, to Joe, and to Grady as well. Can I ask you now to, from here, we really encourage you to have a look at, if you haven't already, at the consultation paper that is available, and to prepare a submission, which you can make via the Consultation Hub, and those details are available on the slide there. So again, thanks very much for your feedback. In terms of the webinars that are coming up, on the 12th of August, we will be running another one of these webinars on assessor services, and on the 15th of August, so next week, we'll be running a further webinar in relation to the energy rating tools and tool accreditation. So please feel free to attend those as well. We've already got quite a good turnout registered, which is fantastic. They'll be recorded as well. So if you're not able to attend, you can definitely catch up by looking at the recording as soon as that's available. And if you have any further questions or queries, please don't hesitate to reach out to the team at admin@nathers.gov.au. So finally, thanks again from everyone here at the department and on behalf of all states and territories, and thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.